On a whim, and unaware of the true meaning of the word, Juliet Santono changed her name to Calamari. Upon receipt of the documents confirming this change, she left on a train bound for Istanbul, and from there to Zinkcha, a small village whose location even the author does not know. It was a cold place with constant 100-mile-an-hour winds, which for that reason existed entirely underground, but for a glass and bronze dome that poked through the permafrost and had within strange and curious gadgets that were even less known than the village. A secret within a secret, where Calamari would become what she had dreamed one day she might become: lifeless. Amid a great white storm, the bronze and glass dome flashed with energy. Great furnaces heating the glass sent rivers of melted ice into gullies through pipes that drove turbines, that made valves move, that cooled machines, that sucked and blew and lifted and dropped and forged and pummeled. And in this maelstrom, Calamari lay upon a cold slab, with 7 forms of suicide at her disposal, and a slave, Chenkov, who stood over her crying, for he loved her. And as his shaking hands began the process, as he prepared the hypodermics and connected electrodes and loaded guns and dripped poison into flasks, so he wept.
All of them,
she cried.
Use all of them, leave nothing to chance.
And so it was that Chenkov threw switches, plunged needles, administered potions to her quivering mouth, pulled a trigger that sent lead into her heart. Her body writhed, contorted, shook, her mouth screamed, her eyes fluttered, her blood boiled, blackened and burst from her buggered blood vessels, and finally she expired. Chenkov fell to the ground, his own heart filled to bursting from it all. He beat his own head with his fists as tears dripped down his reddened and insane eyes.
How are you now?
He screamed.
How are you now, Calamari?
And she arose, grey-skinned, purple-eyed, her blackened veins decorating her scorched and smouldering body like a tattooed fishnet bodysuit, and she screamed.
Oh,
she bellowed in jubilation.
This is much more my kind of thing.
Thank you for listening. It's just a bit of fun.
pale hand shook it so that the pages flapped, and from it fell a glob of ink. that as it hit the floor, wriggled and grew. His toys did not respond, for they were dead. He had killed them. This was Alexander Havelock. And this would be his last evening, and his fate was the catalyst of our tale. Sat at an old pine dinner table was a small, four-armed and hairless man, with holes for ears and a beak. Behind the kitchen table, sat on a high chair, was a heap of ice cream in a green party hat. It had started to wobble and chuckle. There were strange galleries of new creatures formed from parts of old creatures. Why he didn't acknowledge the two figures who watched him from the darkest corners of the room cannot be said. Perhaps he could not see them. Perhaps he feared them. They were, after all, see-through. The other was an older man who wore a white, three-pronged beard. He felt like he'd bought a handful of tickets to a handful of tiny, random dreams, none of which meant a thing to him. He was content to believe that, but while some of it may have been nonsense, the truth was that this little series of moments was in some way a sample of what was to come.